Welcome back to Kleppers Corner, where we dive into history like a caffeinated meerkat in a ball pit full of primary sources. Today we're exploring November 16th, or as historians call it, oh wow, everything really does happen all at once. This date is a fulcrum between creation and collapse, between the best of humanity's ideals and the absolute dumbest things we have ever done. And trust me, that is a competitive category. November 16th gives us everything. Codes of law, collapsing empires, space travel, apartheid cracks, Nazi horrors, technological breakthroughs, Shigeru Miyamoto, and the sound of music. If there was ever a day that looked at the human experience and said, let's do all of it, it's this one. So buckle up, because today's timeline is basically a historical roller coaster built by a committee of geniuses and sociopaths. Segment 1, the architecture of power, Justinian and the empire that needed a filing system. Let's begin in 534, when Emperor Justinian woke up and chose administrative violence. The man revised the Corpus Juris Civilis, the Roman legal code, because apparently ruling half the known world wasn't hard enough without trying to turn 1,000 years of contradictory laws into one tidy little binder. Justinian basically Marie Kondo'd an empire. Does this ancient law spark joy? No. Into the abyss. And the wild part? It worked. It worked so well that Europe spent the next millennium using this code like a legal ready-mix concrete. Everything from sovereignty to property rights eventually flowed from this bureaucratic fever dream. You know a legal system is powerful when its influence survives the empire itself. Rome fell. Barbarians took over everything. But the law? Oh, the law said, nah, I'm staying. It's like the world's most durable house guest. But of course, November 16th can never leave us with just a wholesome moment of legal organization. It immediately counterbalances it with one of the most brutal takedowns in the history of empire. Segment 2, conquest at Cajamarca, how to end an empire before lunch. Jump to 1532, where Francisco Pizarro and 168 Spanish dudes with approximately zero moral hesitation captured Atahualpa, the Inca emperor, in what historians call a battle, but which is really more like history's most violent pop-up event. The Inca showed up with thousands of attendants, carrying their emperor like royalty. The Spanish showed up with cannons, horses, and the boundless competence of men who had never been told no. When Atahualpa rejected the friar's attempt to hand him a Bible, because, and this is key, he had no idea what a book even was, the Spanish took it as a divine mandate for Operation Absolutely Destroy Everything. The Inca attendants, unarmed, threw themselves in front of bullets and swords trying to protect their emperor. And the result? Not just the fall of a ruler, but the instant collapse of an entire cosmology. One cosmic glitch, one captured God King, and suddenly the Incas were like, wait, what do we do? And Pizarro, who absolutely should not have been able to dismantle an empire this big, just kept going. If November 16th has a theme, it's humanity pulling off things it should absolutely not be capable of, for better and for much, much worse. Segment 3, Fort Washington, the day the revolution face-planted. November 16th, 1776. The British and Hessians take Fort Washington, and the American Revolution has its rock bottom, I think we can go lower moment. George Washington, who, by the way, was having a month that would make most therapists retire, watched nearly 3,000 of his men get captured. Fort Washington fell like an overconfident Jenga tower, and suddenly the British controlled New York, morale was flatlining, and the Continental Army was wondering whether the real revolution was the friends we made along the way, because we sure weren't winning battles. But it was necessary. This humiliation forced the Continental Army to stop pretending enthusiasm could beat professional soldiers. They needed structure, discipline, training, not just vibes. And from that low came the grit that led to Trenton, Saratoga, and eventually victory. November 16th loves a twist. Destruction now, transformation later. Segment 4, oppression and resistance. The Warsaw Ghetto and the fault lines of sovereignty. Now we confront November 16th at its darkest. 1940, the day the Nazis sealed the Warsaw Ghetto. 460,000 people forced into 1.3 square miles. A human pressure cooker built from cruelty and bureaucracy. Rations at 181 calories a day. 9 people per room. Disease engineered as a tool of genocide. It wasn't just imprisonment. It was a slow-motion extermination. And the horror here is administrative. Someone had to measure those calories, design those walls, approve those rations. This wasn't chaos, it was paperwork as murder. But November 16th doesn't leave us in despair. It threads oppression with resistance. Because exactly decades later, other November 16ths crack empires open. In 1907, the admission of Oklahoma marks the legal extinguishment of Indian territory, an act whose consequences echo all the way to the 2020 McGirt ruling. In 1988, Estonia declares legal sovereignty over the USSR, a bureaucratic rebellion that sparks the entire parade of independences. In 1989, South Africa repeals the Separate Amenities Act, the first domino in dismantling apartheid. November 16th contains multitudes. Oppression perfected and oppression undone. Segment 5, Engines of Modernity, Electricity, Electronics, and the First Touch of Another World. If you enjoy phones, computers, Wi-Fi, or the ability to doom scroll at 2 a.m., think November 16th, 1904, the day John Ambrose Fleming patented the vacuum tube. This little glowing diode is the ancestor of everything digital. Before it, radio was a noisy suggestion. After it, electronics became a thing. And right next to that milestone, November 16th gives us the 1896 transmission of hydroelectric power from Niagara Falls to Buffalo. Tesla's AC system proving it could run entire cities without catching fire like Edison's DC mess. November 16th also shoots us into space. The Soviet Venera 3 probe in 1965, humanity's first object to touch another planet. Sure, it died before transmitting anything, but honestly, so does my Wi-Fi router. And then in 2022, Artemis 1 launches, the biggest rocket we've ever built, declaring loudly, yes, we're going back to the moon, and this time we might actually stay for more than a long weekend. This date marks the technological arc from electrifying cities to touching planets. Segment 6, Culture, Institutions, and Titans, from UNESCO to Mario. November 16th is also a cultural supernova. In 1945, UNESCO is founded with the immortal line, "Since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed." A direct philosophical answer to the Nazi ideology that sealed the Warsaw Ghetto exactly 5 years earlier. On the same date, The Sound of Music premieres in 1959, teaching generations that fleeing fascists is easier when you can hit a high C. And in 2001, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone debuts, launching a cultural juggernaut about resisting a pure-blood supremacist wizard who really should have taken a gap year. But November 16th also births W.C. Handy, Jose Saramago, Chinua Achebe, and Shigeru Miyamoto. Basically, the Mount Rushmore of global creativity. And it gives us the deaths of Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood's golden age, and Milton Friedman, architect of modern market economics. If the 20th century had a group chat, half its admins were born or died on this day. In conclusion, November 16th may be the most thematically consistent random date on the calendar. It gives us law and disorder, conquest and liberation, genocide and the institutions built to prevent its return. It births the technologies that define modernity and the culture that shapes our narratives. It is humanity in microcosm, our brilliance, our brutality, our curiosity, and our capacity for reinvention, all squeezed into one day's worth of anniversaries. If history is a tapestry, November 16th is the knot where the threads twist, tangle, and pull the whole pattern into view.